Welcome to today's episode of Behind the Success. In today's episode, we have Alex with us, and in particularly, I am eagerly excited for this episode for multiple reasons. One, both I and Alex share a common organization in the past called ISEC, and apart from which, I also stumbled once to a course on Udemy where Alex is talking about storytelling, and I have actually been through the course as well. And thirdly, there are a lot of fundamentals where I believe I have been inspired and moved personally, uh, learning from Alex, and I am actually very intrigued for today's conversation. So thank you, Alex, for accepting my invite and being part of the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for your invitation. And yeah, let's see where this conversation takes us.
My pleasure. So before we go ahead, I would just like to brief you and our audience that in today's conversation, I would like to break the conversation into three segments. And the first segment, I would like to talk about your childhood and early days. And then second segment, I would like to talk about the storytelling and the art of storytelling, and also the science and different uh, curiosity I have about it. And thirdly is more about the future of storytelling and where exactly it is going to go. So let's get going with the first part. All
All
right.
right,
So
let's do this.
sure. So coming to the first aspect, and this is actually coming from one of your talk, and in the talk you're talking about your surname and a story related to it. And as far as I remember, you mentioned that the meaning of your surname is dirt, and in early school days, one of the teacher made fun of it. So the question which it brings to me is that I believe identity, which is something very important to every individual, and I would like to know that how exactly it felt uh, at that time, being, I would say, being made fun of by a teacher itself to you.
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, that was the thing. Like the episode with the teacher was more of a culmination of 3 years of constant bullying around the name. So it was kind of, that was the cherry on top, and where kind of my all my frustrations kind of built up and exploded, so to say. But yeah, it was. That was kind of a theme for me as a child. Like my identity was very much through either the lens of my family name from this point of view, what it meant, or being seen as my father's son or my brother's brother. I wasn't really seen as like an individual, right? It was like, oh, so you're this guy's brother. Oh, you're this guy's son. Oh, Glod. And I never felt I was truly seen beyond that, you know? And I think that's kind of a thing we all have to deal with, is that at first we look at the lens of the identity we're given, or at least how people see us. And it takes a while till we get kind of that, the courage to build our own identity, you know. But yeah, it was tough. Yeah, like I said, it felt like I wasn't really seen by everyone. That's how it felt.
Okay, so now I would like to bring you to the present, and I would like to know that what impact or how long, I would say, the impact was there somewhere back of your mind. And I'm asking this because
Mhm.
I believe there's a concept called conditioning, and when let's say something happens and some reaction happens, and then we are conditioned to a certain behavior. So has it ever happened that, I mean, it conditioned your mind and then something still impacts you somewhere?
Well, for a while, yes. I mean, the first time when I started doing any type of public speaking, you know, there was that dread there. And it was that feeling of like knowing that either I'm a little bit of an imposter, or I'm not my own person, right? So I always felt very small in the beginning. But then somehow there was a little thing that I fought with. Like, for example, I wanted a great deal for people to know me by my first name, Alex, right?
Right.
There's kind of this habit in Romania sometimes that people ask you by your family name, and I always find that very impersonal, right? I find, like, you know, there's the first name, like there's a reason why it's called that way, right? That's what you should celebrate. And soon enough, I kind of went with it, and it was okay. Like I've integrated both the family name, and then Alex Glod became something I was like, oh well, it's me. And the meaning behind the family name kind of went away, and now I mostly share it as a thing that I kind of look back on and smile on. But like, smile in what sense? Like I felt a little bit sad for the people that didn't take the time to know me back then, right? Because I still had a lot to offer. I was definitely a good friend and a fun child to spend time with, right? And for me, it's more about, look at the missed opportunity of how you missed out on someone who could have really shared something valuable, and now it's just also speaks to the idea that, yeah, we give sense to our own identity. But I think in the first 2 or 3 years, it wasn't really as much about the name itself, but there was a bit of a thing about how I form my own identity. How do I come out as my own person? And at first, it was a frustration and a fear, but then there was a sense of pride in kind of overcoming that narrative, right? So for me, it was a celebration. And whenever I was telling the story and everything, it felt like a celebration because I said, you know what? That doesn't mean anything anymore, right? I moved beyond that. And it's a silly thing to subject someone to, right? And I tell the story not just because about, how childhood bullying is a phenomenon or anything like that. This is a lens through which adults see adults as well, right? So for me, it's just a way in which I kind of want to tell to my audience, look how shallow we can be, right? And let's look beyond these shallow ways in which we try to feel better about ourselves by putting someone else down, and just say, come on, let's embrace that we're all weird and quirky in our own way. Either it's our family name or whatever we have, but let's look beyond that. Let's look at the human on the other side of the room, of the table, and see what they have to share, see the humanity that they can bring to the table, their creativity, whatever it is, and now it feels like a relief to know that story is behind me, and it feels such a relief also to not be conditioned by that anymore, right? Because I think conditioning is a very good word. Now it kind of celebrates the freedom of knowing that I'm not conditioned by that anymore, and it's meaningless in terms of what it doesn't have to mean or whatever else says it, but it's meaningful in the sense that I embrace who I am and I embrace that whole story, and I'm happy to be me.
That's lovely. And while you were sharing about it, and I was actually recollecting my own memories of childhood, and I was also thinking that it's actually a sad reality, and that's not something I would say restrained to particular countries. And I think it's a global sad reality that a lot of times our teachers or even fellow students are not encouraged uh, or empowered, I would say, in order to understand the holistical nurturing. I mean, a lot of times teachers just understand their role is more about just the teaching the subject and not about the holistical experience they're creating for their students. So I definitely believe that I hope, I would say, that this is going to change from here, or at least our generation could become better parents in terms of guiding our kids into the right direction.
Yeah, I
From
hope so too. Like, honestly, this was the thing that got me into training as an adult. It was this idea that, like, come on, we can do so much better. And the
Yeah.
first time I got a taste of how fun, participative, and engaging education can be, and authentic and creative and all that, I just felt like, I, where has this been my whole life? And I want to experience more of it, and I want to give people the same opportunity, right? Because I could easily identify with people like myself who, we're probably like, now I'm an extrovert, but I think most of my childhood I was a little bit of an introvert, or I was a bit of a dreamer, or a bit of a, thinking in different ways. And I would have loved to be part of these type of environments. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to make it my mission based on that, to give people a meaningful experience, simply because learning should be fun, right? I think school is kind of the place where, if anything, you actually lose your passion for learning, right? You come out of there thinking to yourself, no more, no more. And when it should be the exact opposite. You should leave school thinking, whew, there's so much to learn, right? And I think Yeah, I think we can do such a much better job, clearly, and it starts with us as adults as well. Like we in our adult environments, the way we teach in corporations, the way we teach each other, and the way we talk to each other about the things we learn and how we involve others into new things, that is where the real change happens. Because I don't believe that just sending our children to Montessori will change everything, because we are still the main reference. Adults are the main reference for a child. And it by the point the child changes their programming, it takes about 20 to 25 years, right? So if we want to see that change in education, it starts with us, because we're all educators in our own rights in our communities.
Right. Definitely. And this brings me to this another incident. Again, back, I wouldn't say this as a childhood days, but then also very personal to you. And I believe you had an opportunity to go on a date, and your date came with a friend, and I believe she was
Yeah.
yeah. So she was. I believe she knew the story happened in the back in school days, and what I'm trying to come to it, and I would also share with our fellow listeners that so Alex went on a date, and date actually came with a friend, and this friend knew about the story about the teacher and the whole incident, and the person shared the story with the date. And I believe in this scenario, date actually reacted, or I would say responded differently. She showed more confidence uh, in Alex than just uh, just listening to the story. So and my emphasis here is not about the story, and this is about the more question that whenever we talk about a story, I believe there is one common element where people usually relate, which is being a hero. And my question to you is that uh, definitely, I mean, let's say if you are sharing the stories, there are incidents where you feel that you have been hero of your own story back in the childhood. And when I see the story from your date's point of view, I'm sure your date played the role of a hero in the story with the friend. So I would like to know that how do you see the overall equation, and how do you see uh, the importance of being a hero in any story?
I think, just to give context to the ones listening, the short story of what happened in my third grade is that once the religion teacher started making fun of me and my family name, and like was really like doing a full on roast, I got very angry. I started crying because I was a 9-year-old, and then I got up, I hit the table, and I started telling him like he should be ashamed of himself. I really spoke up to him. But of course, he then spoke back to me, and at the end, I sat in my chair and said nothing, because he was a big, tall, fat guy. So I was like, nah, I don't have the courage for it. And yeah, the date that happened 9 years later. I was 18, and yeah, and the girl that I met, the friend that she brought with her, was a former classmate of mine, and that former classmate shared the story to her, telling her like, wow, finally somebody stood up to that idiot. And it wasn't one of the big tall guys in class. It's one of the shy guys you didn't even know. And then the girl, yeah, she said, I remember when she came from school and told me that story, and I thought to myself, yeah, we should stand up to these idiots, to these people that are taking advantage of the position they're in, and rather than uplifting and empowering us, they actually are taking us down. And at the end of the day, it's such a petty fight, right? You as an adult, a 50-year-old, you pick a fight with a 9-year-old. It's pathetic, right? And funny enough, we both developed as hip hop fans. Like that was the thing that actually got me interested in her, is that we were part of the very few people in that small town where I was born that we were into hip hop. We would dress with hip hop clothes and stuff like that. So yeah, in terms of the heroism, yeah, being a hero is about, I believe, more than, or at its core, it should be about fighting for what is right. And in that moment, it was just the idea, like it was very unjust, right? So in that moment, I felt I had to fight for what was right. I had to speak truth to power. And after that, of course, I see my classmate as a hero in and of itself, because she could have been like, ooh, the teacher roasted you. Ooh, you're such a, oh, and you cried in front of everybody. No, she was a hero in her own right by saying, wait, there's value in that experience. That was wonderful. Thank you for doing that. And then the other girl for taking that story as a reference and saying, hey, you know what? That is a nice way to see the world. And it's a bit of a spiral effect. I mean, it's or how do you say, it's a ripple effect. That's what I meant, in the sense that one story touches the second person who hears it, that person shares it along, and there is this nice way in which these stories pass on and live on. And that's because they speak about something that we all want dearly in our heart, because we feel injustice, right? We feel things are not the way they're supposed to be. There are certain values that we believe we should hold dear. And when these stories reach the world, everybody is a hero for passing it on, or better, for taking it as a reference for them to implement it in their own lives and in their own way, right? We all take probably the same story template, more or less, and we repeat the template, but what's different is how we experience it and how we view it. And while, yes, there's so much universality in every story, they're unique in their own right. And yeah, we all play a part. I don't think just the storyteller is the hero when a story becomes very well known or viral. Every person that picks it up is a hero for, even in that small gesture of passing the story on, being someone who fights for that idea, who says, you know, this idea needs to be passed on. And I think this is a job we should all engage in.
Definitely. And one good thing which you recently just highlighted, and you talked about that stories, they live on, and that's actually very true. And this actually made me reflect that my grandfather used to tell me a lot of stories when I was super young, and I believe that's my first memory of whenever a story pops into the mind. My next question to you is more about that. What is your earliest memory of being a storyteller, or of any storyteller?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, there are two very defining memories that I only later in life realized how impactful they were. So there was an uncle of my mom, Mr. Paraskiv, and yeah, he was a joyful presence whenever I would go to the countryside. He would come in, tell a lot of stories. You know, he was just bursting with energy, and as someone that I admired deeply. He was also working with like, I don't know, woodworker. I'm not sure what's the proper English term for it, but he did a lot of wood sculpting and building houses and wood structures, things like that. And I valued him so much for all of that stuff. And only later did I realize that there is a lot that I think the way I respected him kind of made me feel like I wanted to be like him involuntarily. And he is definitely a reference for me in terms of being the life of the room, or the life of the party, so to say. And the second story is actually a story that my mom kept telling me, but that I don't personally remember that well. And it was that she was telling me that when I was around 3 years old, I would dress up like this character, which was kind of from the 1930s, quite very representative of those times. You know, dressed up nicely with a hat and an umbrella, a little bit like Charlie Chaplin, but different. You know, but kind of in that vein. And I would come in there and say, I would present myself in a very official way, and I would make everybody laugh. And I think that probably caught on for me early as a child, because yeah, it was a way in which I got everyone's attention, right? And it felt good. Most likely it felt good. And in general, it feels good to be part of the, center of the attention. And I think these two stood up for me because I think I saw that people were respected for that, and I was listened to when I was that. And whenever I was, in a different way, I wasn't really, those were the only ways in which I found you could be interesting, or you could be someone worth listening to. And I think they stuck to me in the background. But honestly, it's weird for me that I don't remember that first thing, because as I grew up, I think starting from the first grade, I was shy as hell. Like, Honestly, public speaking was something I only considered when I was 20. So up until that point, performing in front of others, yeah, I wouldn't. I think, and funny enough, my first real performance, so to say, for example, at a karaoke, was after I drank a lot and I was, fully uninhibited, didn't even think about what was happening. Yeah, these two memories were like a huge reference for me. But the funny thing is, I think up until I was 20, I never thought of myself of being like that. I wanted to be like that. Like I admired people that had the courage to come out, but because of the this very bullish environment in childhood, like whenever I was trying to crack a joke and it wouldn't land, oh boy, you would get so roasted by everyone else, right? So it was like, oh, I'll have to be careful next time. And yeah, I think that was the thing that held me back. But luckily, later on, I managed to overcome that.
Okay. And I would really like to appreciate one thing specifically, that it actually takes a lot of courage being vulnerable and also opening up about one's past. So I would really like to appreciate you for doing that. And thank you for allowing me to get deeper into your childhood days. So thank you, Alex. And I would really like to appreciate qu- one special quality. I would say that's having the courage and being vulnerable about our own stories, and I would really appreciate you for that. And now with this, I would like to officially move to the second segment, which, as I mentioned earlier, which is going to be about storytelling and the craft around it. So coming to it, and this is actually inspired by the same thought when it comes to the leadership. A lot of times people say that leaders are born and leaders are made, and that's a huge debate. So I would like to
Mm-hmm.
know that when it comes to storytelling, do you feel, because the art requires a lot of creativity and skill, so do you feel that uh, so I have two questions here, being honest. One is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how can somebody become a storyteller? And secondly, is it something innate in nature, or it's like a skill which can be honed over a period of time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start off with answering the second one because I think it's crucial.
Sure.
Um, sure, there are certain things about a person's personality or temperament that could lend them to having a little bit of an advantage. But at the end of the day, storytelling is a skill that is accessible to everyone and can be developed by everyone. All right. The difference can be very much in terms of level of performance, right? So someone who has, you can see a talent and also has honed the craft of acting or something of that nature, can really elevate the art of storytelling to the little gestures, to all of that little things. And we can all reach that level of complexity if we wish for. And that's the only times when I can say that there are some, let's say, born qualities that can help. But in terms of doing a good enough job as a storyteller, we all can do that, right? I've seen people even with no arms that can tell very great stories. So that's kind of the thing. Like in terms of what is innate and what you are born with or not born with, it's besides the point when it comes to this art. We are a storytelling species. This is something that only we do. That I've never seen cats meeting together and going meow, 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 meow. Right? We like to gossip. We like to tell stories. We all have it in our nature. And in order to develop it, I think it takes four important skills. First, discovering our own stories. Right? We need to be capable of fully understanding our story, looking deep into it, and finding all of the great stories out there. Then it's about understanding who is your audience, like who are these stories for, right? Because not there is very rarely do you find a story that can resonate with everybody. You will antagonize and you will sometimes bore certain people who are not interested in a certain story. And I think a good storyteller knows whether they have an audience or not whenever they could share a story, but if the audience isn't there for it, there's no point in wasting it. Then it's about how you craft them. So you work on understanding narratives, narrative structure, all of these little tiny details that can go from understanding the basic free act structure and the basic hero's journey to very more complex genres of stories that you can use and different tricks. And the last part is how to tell them, the oral craft of how you tell the story, the way we play with our voices, with our bodies, and how we create a certain tempo and dynamic in the story to keep people engaged. All of these 4 skills are available to everybody. Everyone can develop that. It's a matter of taking the step. And I think the reason we become storytellers isn't for the point of becoming a storyteller. It's because we believe in certain ideas that we find we should pass on to others, right? I think this is the purpose that can drive you to go for all of these steps, which can be sometimes a bit narrowing or scary or boring, right? But if you have a purpose to drive you to become a good storyteller, it'll feel like part of the job. It'll feel natural.
Right. So I would also like to know that a lot of times we say that there is a science behind a lot of things. So I would like to know that from your perspective, what is the science behind storytelling? And also another question to it is that I believe it has to be different for a storyteller and a story listener. So how do you explain that? In terms of the different understanding.
So in terms of the science parts, I can give you one simple demonstration that is going to be like a nice scientific experiment for us and the audience, but this will only be applied to those that can see me, right? So there's a difference between, I woke up this morning, I opened the fridge, I took out a lemon, I cut up the slices and I ate them, versus, so I woke up this morning, went to the fridge, opened up the fridge, took out a lemon, cut a few slices, and then I ate all of them. Now, most likely, there has been a bit of a physical reaction in the second rendition of that simple story, because there is such a thing as the mirror neurons that can kick in. And it's because of that way in which the story is told, right? The facts are the same, but the first part isn't really that engaging, while the second one, it's because of all that movement and gesturing, our body tends to mimic that simply because that's what these neurons do. They mimic the person in front of them. And therefore, depending on our empathy levels, either we're like, or some people can actually feel a sense of sourness in their mouth. And they're like, lemons, I hate them, right? Even though I am not eating a lemon, right? It's not even real. So that's kind of the magic of storytelling, that if it's well crafted and well told as a story in terms of its delivery, it is very physical. Like you feel it in your body, you react to it. There's so many interesting reactions happening into the story. So there's that. The other science behind it is that in order for a story to really resonate, it has to respond to a fear or a need of the audience, sometimes a subconscious one. So good stories manage to put like a nice mirror in front of the audience, right? So there's this other story that I like to tell a great deal, simply because, especially if it's a big crowd, it just gets so many reactions. And it's a story when a few years ago, I went to a city and I decided on the day I was leaving that I would just go to the train station, walk to the train station. And it was a Sunday morning during summer, right? And right like 500 meters before getting there, I hear 3 dogs coming to get me. And in that moment, I did like what every man would do in my situation. I used my troller as a defense shield and I started screaming, help, help, help. And that's a moment where everybody starts laughing. Right? Everybody's laughing, wow. And then I looked at them and I say, my life was in danger and you're laughing. That's very empathetic of you. And again, they laugh and like, but then they're not realizing, because all of it is unconscious. Why is this funny? You might say it's because, you use this voice and it was unexpected. In fact, it was a beautiful mirror to the fact that any man in that situation would start yelling like a little girl, right? That's a truth that in our, like at that moment, we're caught off guard and we're like, yeah, woo. Right? That's the thing. Like good stories are a mirror to our own subconscious experience or to what we're feeling deep inside, but we have a hard time reflecting to other people. And those are the stories that really click, that understand these subtle nuances, right? If these, I believe, are things that if they are implemented, properly used, they're magical. And that's where science is, right? And the concept of storyteller and story listener, again, matters a great deal, right? Most of the